Hello there, and a welcome again from me. I'm just briefly going to tell you who I am and then explain how the rest of the evening will run. My name is Bernie O'Neill. I'm a Eurobodalla permanent resident, have been for the last half dozen years, but a ratepayer for 25 years, so been around for a while. I'm a convener of an organisation called A Better Eurobodalla that some of you may have heard of. We're a community forum dedicated to achieving open, accountable and responsive government in the Eurobodalla. We've been operating since September 2019. We're non-aligned, including, I'd like to say, with the group that's called A Better Council. So it's just we're A Better Eurobodalla, but we're not part of A Better Council. It's a separate group who are represented here this evening. Again, I'd ask all participants to be respectful of everyone else in the room, so that's everyone in the audience as well as the candidates, and that people are not interrupted when they're speaking. We'll be strictly sticking to time limits to maximise the number of questions and the opportunities for all candidates to speak. We're going to start with an introduction from each of the candidates for about 2 to 3 minutes, and they'll be kept to a 3-minute time limit. And then for the replies to questions, we'll be limiting that to 2 minutes to each reply from each candidate who chooses to reply to a question. We'll try and get through the maximum number of questions, but given the time constraints and the number of candidates, there are likely to be questions that we don't get to. These will be taken on notice and submitted to candidates, and the Tuross Head Progress Association and A Better Eurobodalla will publish all the responses. So we know that when these forums have been run here in the past, people have missed out asking a question. They're important questions. So we wanted a way of capturing those questions, giving the candidates a chance to answer them, and then making sure that information gets out. So we'll undertake to do that. We're going to start with some governance questions after the candidates have introduced themselves. So I'll talk about those at that point. But now I'm going to start with Rob Pollock because he's the closest, and we'll just pass the microphone along. Oh, here we are. And Kathy's going to do that. So, as I said, each candidate's got a chance to talk for a few minutes, introduce themselves and tell us what they think is important. Thanks.
Thanks for the opportunity to join you tonight. I've lived in the Eurobodalla at Potato Point since 1983. I've owned and run restaurants in Bodalla for the first 10 or 12 years, and then for about the same length of time in Bateman's Bay. So I've got a good spread of experience through the south and the north of the Shire. I've always been self-employed. My kids were brought up at school here in Bodalla and Narooma, and I just think it's magic to live here and to have that opportunity. I came from Melbourne originally. The only thing I remember from philosophy at university was John Stuart Mill, and that was the greatest good for the greatest number. And whilst I've never had an agenda in council, I've held pretty true to that principle, which means I won't ever try to please everybody, but in my assessment of whatever issues are before us, I will do what I think is in the best interest of the majority of people around the place. Personally, I want the Eurobodalla to remain a place where you would aspire to live, where you'd be happy to raise your family, and where businesses prosper. I believe that in a successful business environment, you enhance the opportunity to look after those that perhaps have less ability to look after themselves. And Council has been very active in the region of helping people that are less competent in that field. And I would certainly commit to maintaining that action on Council's behalf. As far as other community involvements, I chair a body called Regional Development Australia, which is a federal body, and our particular region covers from Berry down to the Victorian border, and we're a body that facilitates and points out to government where we think there are greater opportunities for economic investment to get and make our communities stronger and better. I've also in the past been heavily involved with getting the new oncology and renal centre in the Eurobodalla Hospital, and was happy to head up a fundraising activity that raised over $260,000 out of our community alone. and I certainly want to see the new hospital have everything that we currently have, but a hell of a lot more. Thank you.
G'day, James Thompson. I've just finished my first term on council. I'm the fifth generation of my family to serve on council, so you know we've been around for a long time. I've got some of the other members on my ticket, which you probably know, but Joe Starling and Jen Campbell from Tuross, and Catherine Lawler, a farmer from Cadgee. I'm a sheep farmer, is my day job. Still rebuilding since we got wiped out in the fire, so that's a work in progress. I'm the chairman of the Disability Inclusion Action Committee on Council and deputy chair of the Heritage Committee, Goolagga Board of Management, Australian Coastal Councils Association, and delegate to Floodplain Management Australia. Basically, I think the biggest reason I would like to be returned is to see through a lot of these big projects that we started, like Bay Pavilion, Southern Dam, the shellfish hatchery out there at Maria, which is going to be, I think, quite exciting, that one. Other things that I've been proud to be part of is the airport upgrade and the new BAS exhibition space, working particularly with people with disabilities a lot, and accessibility issues has been really rewarding. And the work that council's done since the fires, there was 19 bridges that had to be replaced, and so much work down that. And you know, and during the fires itself, I think council was just amazing, and it was proud to be a part of that. That's probably all for me at the moment. I'll hand it on.
Hello, Matthew Hatcher. I decided to stand for council about 2 years ago when, just under 2 years ago after the fires. A bit of background about myself. Like most of you, I was born somewhere else, but decided to find this place and call it home. I met my wife in the States about 20 years ago, moved over here, and just thought it was the best place on the planet. We decided to travel the world for a while, and after about 10 years, we came back to this space. I was working just random jobs, but I realized that, you know, to really make it, you had to start a business. So I started a small business. And since then, in the past 7 years, I've created 4 different small businesses in the region, employing lots of people. The president of the Batemans Bay Chamber, and I was vice president previous to that. Most recently, post-bushfires, I started a non-profit group called South Coast Donations Logistics, which our role sort of in the community at that time was just to take in goods and make sure that they were distributed throughout. In the early stages, the design was there to, I guess, just support the streets in the town that I was currently in, but it sort of turned into a much bigger project. And over the next, 12 months, and even up until today, we're still sort of going in the background. We worked from Lake Conjola down to the border, and we pushed distribution of products, houses, water, cars, RVs out to the community. I am super passionate about this community and just seeing it rebuild, and having a young family, and just making this place as live up to what I know it can be. So I just, really want to instill that more than anything, this community is still rebuilding after the fires, and I think it's key that we have some young, passionate people on council that are willing to open the doors and allow community to be heard and make sure that we're doing the best for everyone in the community.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Smith. I'm standing for the Better Council Group. May I just say it's really encouraging to see such support here from the community. So democracy is alive and well. Good to see you here. I've lived in this area for 40 years, raised a family, and in fact I've lived on this lake for ages. I'm very concerned about the condition of this whole area. I've raised a family here and I've worked from Tilburg to Tuross through the whole Shire. I know it very well. And a little about me, I've had to write it down. I've had an extensive career and experience at senior level in local government and private enterprise with management and environment qualifications. I've been retired for a while and I've been the manager of TeenSafe for 20 years, trying to put safe young drivers on our highways because of the terrible lack of public transport we have here. I'm active supporter of the One Level 4 hospital, and I must say Dr Holland's here tonight, and I must congratulate Dr Holland on the work he's done for the One Level 4 hospital. Please, you're clapping into my time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. To me, the One Level 4 hospital is probably the major piece of infrastructure we could have in the Shire into the future and for now. I was a former director and the last chair of the Mayoral Hospital Board, hence my involvement in the One Hospital Group, vitally important. I was deputy captain of the Tuross Bushfire Brigade many years ago. Past board member of Regional Development Australia. Past vice president of the Tuross Progress Association, this august group here. I had to stand down because I'm a candidate. Former member of the Royal Society of Health. Vice President of the Mayoral Community Film Club. I wrote a book recently, author of The Last Bonfire, about the baby boom history. Member of the Eurobdalic Classic Car Club. And last but certainly not least, father of 4, and I've lost count of the number of grandkids. So that's me. What I stand for this Shire, if I'm elected, is to promote ESC, Eurobdalic Shire Council, but I look at it as ESC, as economy, sustainability and the economy. Those 3 things have got to work together for us to move into the future. Thanks very much.
Evening all, I'm Tubby Harrison. We moved here in 1994 from Cairns with 2 little kids, and we ended up bought a business, the local produce store in Mayoral, which we had for 21 years. Then we sold it, and we did 2 years travelling around Australia, and then come back, and now I'm retired again. I'm retired again, I should say. I really feel like we need to put some time into this community. I don't think that we've had the leadership out of the last council that we need. We do need somebody to lead this community to get along. And I really, in all the things that I've done, I've found that you have to have somebody that stands up and is accountable, and I think I'm the right person to do that job. In Mayoral, I've done a lot of community stuff. I've worked on the race club. I've done a lot of work at the local show. I've worked on the Chamber of Commerce. Me and Cole Chester are the ones that put the Christmas decorations up for many, many years until Essential Energy have decided that we can't do it no more. That's unsafe to do. But they're still going up again this year, and we're still working through the issues. So look, I'm the sort of fellow I like to get in and work. I like to get in and work behind the scenes to make things happen. And I think that's what this council needs to do. We need to get all the councillors together. We need to work together for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of the council itself. So, thank you very much.
Good evening, Turossians. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. I have to tell you, Kyla Lake brings back horror memories for my children. They will think of days stranded on a windy lake while their father sails for hours and hours. And as you know, with sailing, it's never in a calm condition, so we don't bring my kids here very much anymore. Anyway, so I'm Karen Starmer, and I'm the mayoral candidate for the main team. Councillor Anthony Main, who I'm sure you all know is number 1 on our ticket. Number 2 is Dr. Michelle Hamrossi, who's up the back there, and Trevor Moore, who's a Tuross resident. We're the main team. So I am a Maroubra resident. I have lived here since the late 1990s. My husband, Dr. Neil Starmer, and I came here with 2 babies, basically, and we made this home and we wouldn't live anywhere else. I have a background, I was a financial markets trader for HSBC Bank in Sydney for a decade. And then when I moved here, it was a decision about, do I support a GP husband or do I try and get a job? But there was no job for financial markets traders in the Eurobodalla, so I became a volunteer for 20 years. And in that 20 years, I have served on school boards. I've been president of the Parents and Friends Association of St Peters for 5 years. I have served Maroubra Surf Club for a very long time. I've organised the Town to Surf Fun Run. I was instrumental in reviving Mirrabooka Riding Club, which went into hibernation for a while. I ran junior rugby for Bali Dolphins for 5 years. And I was coordinator of Maroubra Jazz Festival for 10 years, if you remember, back in the days when we could close streets to have a parade. So I am that person that can do. I have executive level experience. I can read a balance sheet. I can read legislation. I'm a person who likes to collaborate, to lead. I think our council at the moment has lost that sense of collaboration. I think our community wants councillors and the mayor to be listeners. We need to be advocates for you, for the community. And as mayor, that's what I would be, the lead advocate for you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alison Worthington. I'm the lead candidate and mayoral candidate for the Eurobodalla Greens. And on our group ticket, I bring with me Nadine Hills from Akalele and Kyla Ryder from Maroubra Heads, a nice strong women's ticket there, along with Charlie Bell from Tomakin. I've come all the way from Maroubra to be with you this evening, where I live with my partner Ted in rental accommodation on the edge of town, and I really love the fact that I can ride and walk into town. Maroubra can be such a great, walkable, accessible town. It's got all the right ingredients, and I just love where I live. I arrived there in 2014. I was drawn to the area because of some dear old school friends of mine that live here, and completely sucked in by places like Kyla Lake and just the stunning natural surrounds, but also the strong community that I came across. I quickly became immersed in a community around sage, sustainable agriculture and gardening Eurobodalla. I had a little bit of a stab at market gardening, but what I was really interested in was this resurging local food economy. And that gave me an insight into how community banded together when they saw that food security was actually in trouble here. As it is in much of Australia, we think we're great producers, but there's some issues around what our access to food is really like and how safe it is. And I saw a group that had banded together to go, well, what could we do about that? And they actually set out with a program of growing a grower. We don't have food growing here if we don't encourage growers to be here. So just seeing that, how a community group can work for the better of their community really inspired me. You might have seen me in Maroubra in the bookshop and in other retail situations. I've also worked as a disability carer since I arrived here. I'm a daughter, aunt, a lover. I'm a step-grandparent and a step-parent. I'm a godparent. I'm a people person. I'm a permaculturalist. I'm an activist. When I say activist, I mean that I just don't sit by when I see injustice. And I'm proudly green. And that's just a shortcut to knowing a little bit more about me. If you know a bit about what the Greens stand for, we are backed up by 4 pillars, which are social and economic justice, peace and non-violence and disarmament, environment, and grassroots democracy. So that's a shortcut to knowing who we are and what we stand for. In coming to council, we're bringing a campaign line at least of accountability, which we'll hear much more about this evening. Livability. We all love to live here, but how can we make that really work? And environmental responsibility. So thanks, I look forward to the evening ahead.
Hi, I'm David Grayson. I'm from Uradella Labor. We have a team of 6 people. Myself, Maureen Searson from Batemans Bay, Matthew Findlay from Batemans Bay as well, Claire McCash from Maria, Jack Egan from Rosedale, and Deirdre Russack from Narooma. Thank you for inviting me to speak to the Tuross community this evening. One of my first memories is of the Tuross Brood Shed when I was about 4, so this place is special to me. I've lived in Uradella since 1988, and I've not found a better place to live. When I moved here in 88, I had a 1-year-old son, and I was employed by the council to set up their community services area. At the time, it consisted of a community transport scheme and a few other things. My first work was to get the community centre in Maria up and running. Over the next 8 years, I had a lovely time actually building and developing the community services in the bay, in the Shire, and found that was an amazing experience. Working with the community, I had so many committed community people who gave me wise advice when I needed it. Sat there and told me you are not doing the right thing at other times. It was excellent, and that's how the council should be. I left Uradella for a while. I couldn't keep myself away from it. I came back and I opened up Smith's Music. Some of you may remember it in the Bay. So I've actually had extensive retail experience as a manager and as an owner of a small business in the Bay. I know how hard it is to run a small business. I then spent some time working with people who are homeless or at threat of homeless. I've also worked as a social worker in child protection. I know this Shire backwards. I know people who are doing it really well. I know people who are doing it really tough. And I know that both of those people are in this Shire. So what do we want? Members of the Uradella Labor team decided to stand to council because we all want to make a difference. For too long, the council's not listened to the people it serves. It's one rush-shot over communities in Batemans Bay with the Bay Pavilion, with Bowlee with the Clark Street Community Land, and Dalmeny with Tatiara Crescent. No wonder you're worried about your heritage lands and the proposed developments in Tuross. We want a council that builds partnerships with the community it serves, not the walls it has built over the years. We know that knocking down these walls will not be easy. It will take more than a few aspirational statements. We've worked with our local Labor colleagues over this long campaign to work out what we need to do to make these changes and how we can achieve them. You can see our practical and realistic 90-day schedule on a web page.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Sorry, but we really have to get you the time frame. Thank you. Okay. Max. Max is going to start off our questions. Max Castle from Tuross Head. So we're starting with some questions about governance, as I said. Max has a question he's going to put, and then I'm going to put a series of questions to the panel which simply require them to say whether they agree with a statement or not, because it's a way of getting through quite a lot of material simply because there's so many people. So after Max's questions, we'll go to those governance questions, and then there's some more questions that members of the association have put forward, and we'll work our way through those. Thanks, Max.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for attending tonight. My question is, the community say they have lost faith with the councillors and senior staff in council. If you're elected, how would you improve governance, transparency, communication and restore faith and trust for the community?
So I'm going to give the mic to those of you who would like to answer that question. All 9 of you aren't obliged to answer, but who would like to answer that question? Who would like to start off? Okay, Karen.
Thank you. Governance. Governance is possibly our number one thing. I forgot to mention that I'm a journalist, so I'm a professional communicator. And part of communication is listening. And we believe as the main team, and I do as mayoral candidate, that part of listening means that we need to implement culture change in council. And that's not lip service culture change, that's management consulting culture change. That is that people come to council with their problems, with their issues, with their actions, and rather than council seeing its residents as a problem, the first thing they get taught to do is to say, how do I serve my community?
Thank you. David?
I can't agree with Karen Stunham anymore. What we need is a change in the way the council sees the people it serves. The people it serves are the reason the council is there. We need to have a council which welcomes them into the doors, doesn't create barriers. Make sure that when it does make decisions, people understand why those decisions are made and feels that they have had a chance to make a contribution to those decisions. One of the things that we've been working through over the last 2 years with this campaign is how do we do that? How do we make it so that the council actually is responsive to the community it serves? And we have actually built a very strong, very realistic way of doing that, which is available in our policy statements. We expect to see a council which welcomes organisations like the Tuross Progress Association into its doors, because this association knows what happens at Tuross and knows how to make sure that the Tuross residents are served well. The council needs to hear that, the council needs to welcome that, the council needs to be a part of your community, and you need to be part of the council.
Thanks. Anyone else? Let's keep it down this end. Thanks. Just going to come to you, Bill. So yeah, it's no secret that this outgoing council has had a problem with engaging with the community, as Karen and David have also touched on. And I really fear for our nation as a whole for the lack of trust that people now have in government. And I think if we can do anything for that, we should start it here at local level. And a whole lot of people are disengaged from the political process for so many reasons. But there's a lot we can do to bring them back in. And so that's what the accountability and transparency and accessibility is all about for us. We've got things like the public forum and public access sessions, which are supposed to be ways for people to have their say at council. Access to those is slowly being eroded, and we're going to be all about bringing that back. The technology's there to record them, to live stream them, to make them available to people that can't make it to a council meeting. And there's no reason why we can't extend that technology to public access and other council meetings and committee meetings and briefings. I know that when I go to clean the house, I open the curtains, I turn the lights on, and I work in the light. We've got to shine a whole lot of light on the council processes and everything that's happening in that building, so that the community can have faith in what the people representing them are doing and how they're relating with the staff that are doing the work. So I really look forward to seeing changes in how we go about that. And I'm hoping that I can work with fellow councillors to demand that transparency, that we can back each other and agree that whether we have the same policies or not, if someone on council decides that we need to call for a release of documents and information and get away from the commercial in confidence secrecy, that others will back us. We don't have to agree on all policies, but we do need to agree on that. Let's call it radical transparency, and let's change the way we do that in council.
Well said, Alison.
Thank you. I think I agree with what you were saying, that the park, I think you can agree, I believe, that there's been for the last at least decade, in all levels of government, the three levels of government, a complacency or even an arrogance has drifted in, and it's almost becoming standard now. One of the reasons I'm running for council is I just don't like this complacency and arrogance that we're seeing. And I think we're looking at governance at the top levels of these organisations. I'd be the first to say that the general staff at the council, particularly the outdoor staff, some excellent people there, hard workers. I think the concern is at the top level, where the governance sort of filters down, governance. I wrote to the General Manager recently and then consequently wrote an article in the Beagle, which some of you astute people may have read. And I asked the General Manager, as a candidate, what were the contract terms with executive staff, just as a point of trying to have a strategy of what's going on at the council, where do people stand. And the General Manager wrote back a lovely letter but did not answer the question. That's concerning me that there's a secrecy there. I didn't ask for the pay scales of these staff, I just asked when and if there's a contract, when is the time up. I'm not entitled to get that information, although I am entitled, I'm a member of the public and a ratepayer. But that wasn't forthcoming, and that to me is it's a systemic thing there. There's just this secrecy, and I hope with the right people in council we can change that. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everyone who's said here so far. As President of the Chamber of Commerce, one thing we ran into many times was the advisory committees, both tourism and business, that was closed down with the current council. You know, bringing people along, bringing industry along, and bringing community along is key to all this. And you know, one of us in this panel will be mayor. The rest of us, hopefully, most of us will get on the council. It's important that that we're all working together, and I know we've all reached out to one another and spoken already, and it's key that going in, we've got the idea that we're all here for the community. It doesn't really matter who gets the top job, it's about us all working together for the common goal.
I've found over a very long period of time that the majority of people don't have an awful lot of dealings with council, so when they do, it's quite balking for them. I've found in my role over a long period of time, and I do think it's important in the leadership role, you're there to help. And just introducing, because you've been around a while, in my case, you are familiar with the various situations, and you can assist people. You can also assist the staff to be far more constructive in the way they are forward. It took me 10 or 15 years to get a general manager to agree that when the staff pick up the phone in answer to any query, the first thing they do is introduce themselves, and the second thing is, how can we help? That alters the whole tone of the conversation. We are there to help. We are there to assist where we can for those that are not as skilled in the ways of the world. But you also need to understand there are legislative requirements that don't always enable you to give the answer to folk that they think they're entitled to. So don't for a minute think that we're not there to help, but understand that you can't always give the detail that some of you are aspiring.
Whatever Rob said, I can't improve on that. That's how it is.
Okay, thanks, and thanks, Max, for the question. Okay, so now I'm going to put a series of questions to the candidates that are about governance again, and they're essentially about how would candidates operate if elected. I should point out, because it may not have been clear, that everyone on this panel is standing for mayor except for James, and James is here because he's got a ticket that doesn't have a mayoral candidate. So we wanted to make sure that all the tickets were represented. So there's a whole bunch of potential mayors and James here. What's behind the questions I'm about to put to the panel is a strong community interest that goes beyond local issues but goes to how elected councillors work in relation to each other, the community and council employees, as Rob has just alluded. So, I'm going to put a question, and then I'm just going to ask you to put your hand up in response to this question, if you agree to it. Would you support live streaming of public forum and public access sessions? So this is your chance to look at the answers that these candidates are putting forward. So this is supporting live streaming, and we're recording this. Thank you. All right?
Who did not put their hand up?
James.
And Rob put his hand up
Yep.
after some hesitation.
Right, Rob put his hand up, that's correct, okay? So that's the...
Rob did vote to have it removed.
Okay. Will you support, the next question, will you support Eurobodalla Shire Council rejoining the New South Wales Local Government Association? Okay, that's unanimous, I think. No, sorry? No? Okay.
Yes, no questions.
Okay, all right. Sorry, this is what they are, so it's your choice to answer or not. You can choose not to answer. Will you support expanding the role and the resourcing of open advisory committees of council as a way of improving community engagement and expert advice? There's been some mention of advisory committees. This is a chance to say if you would support engaging them further. Okay, so... Okay, yeah, well, we're all about being genuine, absolutely. Okay. This is another question about advisory committees, but a very specific one. Will you support expanding the role of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee of Council to include a formal review function? Okay, there is no capacity currently in the council committee structure to review the administration of council. It's the administration of council. Okay, this is, excuse me, this is actually formally expanding that to recognise a review function in the title of the committee. So that's the question to the panel. Would you support that? Your choice to vote or not. So, okay, sorry, can you just put your hand up again in response to that? Got a bit messy? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, do you believe that councillors should personally respond to calls and emails from residents and ratepayers?
Put your hand up, James.
Excuse me. Do you believe that councillors should respond personally to emails and calls from ratepayers? So it's a question to you as candidates. Do you believe you should? Okay, sorry?
There's a grey area. There are nutcases.
Okay.
Are you calling me a nutcase, Gary?
If you could just give an answer that you're comfortable with. Okay.
Quite often there is a general question put to the whole nine and to senior staff. Sometimes, though, a general response from, if it's of a technical nature, is more than adequate.
Okay, so
rather than specifically
this is
response.
a person approaching a councillor personally with an email or a phone call. So the question is, do you believe you should personally respond to that? Okay.
Or the media. The same with the media. Should they respond to the media? Put your hand down, James.
Okay. So, given community concerns about development in the Shire, will you support Council developing a Shire-wide plan for sustainable development?
So the answer is yes.
If it's a real plan.
Yes, a plan that will be held. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks for those responses. That's very helpful. We're now going to go to some questions that members of the association have put forward. I'll remind those people asking questions to be respectful to everyone in the room, and that the questions are short. Again, we'll be limiting the time for candidates to answer, but we'll take it by ear. Okay, the next question is from Fitzroy Bolting, and it concerns the Kyla Park Heritage Grazing Lands.
Thanks so very much, Madam Chair. I'd like the candidates to listen very closely to this question, and one councillor in particular. And the question is as follows. On behalf of the community, would candidates like to state for the record what ironclad guarantees they are prepared to offer to our community to substantively protect and preserve the unspoilt beauty and heritage status of our much-loved heritage grazing lands, and specifically commit to not changing the status of any part of those lands to general purpose or similar? And I'm listening very closely to your responses. Thank you.
Okay, who'd like to answer that?
Simple answer, yes. Yeah, it won't be touched during my time on council, and it can't be touched anyway.
Okay, so we have an affirmative from these two current councillors or retiring councillors. I'm standing again. Is there anyone else here who'd like to comment about the heritage grazing lands?
Yes, as I've been on the Tuross Progress Association for some years, the association has contacted and written to council many times about clarifying that issue with the community land, and it looks to be okay, but there's this underlying query and worry we have that it's not ironclad, and if I'm elected to council, I'll be trying to find out what's going on and make that ironclad as community grazing land or community land.
Thank you, Gary.
As Mayor, I would guarantee to you that community lands in general, not just the Tuscany of the South, gets touched. And to that end, it horrifies me what happened in Dalmeny, what happened in Browley. I do not understand how community land was actually given to us by people with vision, with an idea of history and heritage. I do not understand how that can be put forward by staff, a show of hands, and it's gone. And once it's gone forever. So the only way we can protect that is to protect it from show of hands. So we need to implement some way that there must be consultation to a letter, not just to a let's talk to them and see what they say and ignore it, but there must be consultation, extensive consultation and agreement by the ratepayers, by the residents, that that land gets overturned as community use.
Thanks, Fitzroy, and I'd like to offer you ironclad, but it absolutely depends on the makeup of the council, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's just such a festering wound and such a shame that this issue's been allowed to go on for so long. And I can't stand to see community groups such as these and the Lake Preservation Group and all over the Shire, people just feeling this sense of threat that their precious natural places are going to be taken away from them. Why do we have to live in such fear? It should be known which lands are set aside for this, which lands are protected. If we're unsure, we need to go through the process, whatever it is, to achieve a level of protection, especially for these lands that have been bestowed to the community by generous benefactors in the past. All the documentation is there. It's very well known that this was a gift of the community. I really hope we get this resolved on the next term of council, and I look forward to working on it.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you.
I'd also like to, I agree with Alison, we have to work out the structure of the council, but if Uredale Labor has anything to do with it, we will give that guarantee. This is actually a bigger question than just the heritage lands here. It's all about community land and the land which council has in trust for this community. We need to make sure that the council doesn't just decide, oh, well, we might, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, we might want to sell it, and then surprise the community by doing it. we've had that problem already with Tatiara Crescent, with Browley. We have also had that nasty little surprise with the Batemans Bay Community Centre. And I'm wondering what nasty surprise we might get from the bowling club as well in Batemans Bay. The council needs to be, and the councillors need to have some ability to look at these things, to reflect the community's views, to hear the community's views, and more importantly, to have the community tell the councillors what is needed. We need to kind of start to make a council which is actually there to listen, not to tell. When we are in council and we get the people that we need, as I hope we will, I'm hoping you will see that change, that you'll see a council which is there to consult, to listen, and then to enact the will of the community, not look at the dollar value and then say, oh well, might as well sell it. I just think that is incredibly wrong. And the other important thing with that is we need community land, because this is what makes this place special. It's the special land that's all around us. And the last thing we want is to find that land is taken away from us. Thank you.
Thanks, Tori. I think it's very clear that our team, along with the other people here, are looking to be elected. I think we're on the same page. The community was donated the land, and it's simple. It's donated land. It should always remain that. And I think that's, just like David was saying, it's a bigger issue. It's happening all over the Shire, and the land that's being donated by people to the community needs to remain in community hands for good. Period.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I've got a question from Michael Holland about the One Hospital.
I submitted the question, I just haven't got a copy of it. But it wouldn't be a meeting here without bringing health up, and I acknowledge that health issues, building hospitals are state and federal issues. I think the last time I was here I was facing that way and made the mistake of asking a closed, an open question of will you support a new Eurobodalla hospital to the federal candidates? What will you do within the role of local government to support the opening of the new Eurobodalla hospital to level 4 services?
Thanks, Michael. Well, we've already commenced forming a group to make sure that we are going to provide accommodation on site for those people that will need to either be supporting patients or are patients. I think the essential thing is that all of the facilities that are located in the new hospital are sufficient to cater for the growing needs of what is obviously a growing community. So I don't believe that any of the facilities that are envisaged in the new hospital should be of a lesser standard than we currently have. They should all be of a scale that can take into account the growing needs of the whole of our community. And having been involved in the past in appeals of this kind to make sure that we had adequate facilities, in particular in this case with oncology and renal, I'm certainly happy to be behind any of the issues. And as a local government official, whether I'm the mayor or hopefully whether I'm a councillor, I will do all I can to advocate and push for the needs of our community to be recognised and properly catered for in the new hospital.
James?
Yep, again, what Rob said, but that's what we do. We listen to you, and then we take those views to the ministers and local members, and that's the biggest thing we can do as councillors, is be that conduit between you and higher levels of government, and that's what we are doing.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I met with Michael a couple of months ago, and after that meeting I spoke with our local member and expressed my concern on not having level 4 from the start. I've recently met with Fiona Phillips as well to just voice that also. I think it's imperative that we open with level 4 facilities from day one, and we're not moving backwards.
I don't think anyone on this panel is going to disagree with any of that. Since I was chair of the Mayoral Hospital Board, I estimate we have spent as a community $100 million sending people in ambulances up the mountain to Canberra, to Sydney, let alone air ambulance. And then you throw into that the cost of it. I know a number of people in this shire, some in this room, that have gone to Sydney and Canberra week after week after week for treatment, and they've had to pay for accommodation. $100 million to me is conservative. Let alone the next decade, our demographics have changed. We've got a lot more people here, young and old. I think we're looking at another $100 million in transport, plus your own personal expenses, if we don't get decent level 4 here now. I think our state government's letting us down. Perhaps they think it's a safe Liberal seat, so they don't have to really try. I think it's not a council issue, frankly, but if I were a councillor, I would be pushing for the council to be an effective lobby group for things like one hospital.
So, health. Obviously, my family business is in health. Even though I'm not a health worker, I have lived health for all my adult life, being Neil's partner. As you know, health is in crisis in this state, and health is in crisis in Eurobodalla. The fact that we had every level of government stand in a paddock down that road, proudly saying that here is the site of a new hospital, and then I found out last week that no one had actually bothered to make an offer to the person that was selling the land, is truly a disgrace.
Yes.
So we take the photo opportunity, and then behind the scenes, and this is the problem that we're all subject to at the moment, whereas at local, state or federal, where everything goes on behind closed doors. And so behind closed doors, our hospital has been chipped away. Our future hospital's been chipped away, and while we're not looking, our current health services are being chipped away. It's a disgrace. Yes, it's a state and federal matter, but as councillors, and if I was your mayor, I would be that squeaky wheel. Squeak, 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 and not let up. I will back Dr. Holland up. I will back One Eurobodalla Hospital up, and I will not stop, because this shire is not going to thrive without that level 4 hospital staffed with equipment, with everything we deserve that city people take for granted from day one.
Karen, you're hurting my ear with all that squeaky, squeak, squeak. Thanks, Michael. You asked what role can council play. And it's been referred to that they have a role to lobby to state government, advocate to state government, and that's true. But not only when a community group such as yours starts to raise the alarm. I think we need a council that's on the front foot on this. The state government will continue to turn up with their new infrastructure projects, and if we're not ready, they'll be literally dumped upon us, and they might not suit our needs. Let's look at the hospital. We know we need level 4 upon opening, and it's not what they're thinking of giving us. So thanks for your work in advocating for level 4 opening. But I really mean it. I think, we've got great minds in this community. We've got the opportunity to get together and have some really good conversations about what we do want the community to look like, what we want development to look like, what we want our healthcare to look like. And we need to get on the front foot, and council needs to be right there with us, so that when the state government turns up with their projects, we say, yeah, these are our expectations when you come to build that hospital. And I think that with both the hospital and bypass projects, there's opportunity for us to really put our foot down and say, yeah, we're going to need some serious coordination here. We're in the middle of a housing crisis, and you're about to bring construction workers in for these 2 major projects. And then we're also going to find out afterwards that we don't have housing for the essential workers that we need to run the hospital. So we need interagency cooperation between health and roads and transport, and we need council leading the community in demanding the infrastructure, the housing, all of the services that we expect from these projects. So that's the role of the council.
I think all of the things that have been said are very important, and we keep going back to advocacy, which is one of the major roles for a functioning council. It has to be an effective advocate. To be an advocate, you need to have planning, and as Alison very rightly said, we need to be on the front foot, not just with the hospital, but with a lot of other infrastructure. We have the hospital, and I want to talk about that. We also have the bypass, and as Alison has very rightly said, we have a rising problem with housing. We're going to find ourselves very soon in a situation where there aren't enough houses, enough affordable houses for the people who need to be here to make sure our community works. We need to actually do, as part of being councillors and as being mayor, actually have our own infrastructure plan. What do we need in this community to make sure it works and works well? Another role for a good, effective advocate is not to hear just the loud voices. There are lots of small voices out there, voices which aren't heard, or when they are heard, are dismissed. People who have mental health problems, people who have who are children, they aren't heard. And often what happens is that services that should be there aren't there. I want to go back to mental health because mental health is really important. At the minute, if you have a serious mental health problem and you need hospitalisation, as many people do, your options are to go to, I think, Goulburn now. I think there was one time where it was available in Bega, but Goulburn, it's too far away. One of the issues with mental health is that you do need family, you do need people around you who you're familiar with. If you're already in a mental health crisis and you send off to Goulburn, it doesn't help your problem. We need to make sure as councillors and as mayor that we are the advocate for the small voices, the voices which you've never heard. If we don't do that, we aren't doing the job right.
Thank you. Now there's a question from Malane Bolton.
Thank you for the opportunity. Councillors from our neighbouring councils have the opportunity to talk directly to their constituents through a series of scheduled community meetings. If elected, would you support a similar programme of quarterly meetings between councillors and the community to openly discuss issues relevant to them?
Now that could be just a show of hands. If you'd actually support regular scheduled meetings between constituents and councillors and the mayor, excellent outcome. Thank you. Thanks, Renee. Now, Kathy Milliken has a question.
Thank you. The 2019-20 bushfires exposed inadequate disaster planning and emergency response capacity in this shire. Tuross Head and other villages have no evacuation centres. What would you do about this?
I think firstly, everybody needs to recognise the scale of the disaster, and it's easy to be critical of the response at that time. But the New Year's Eve evacuation of the South Coast is the largest civilian evacuation in Australian history. So just get that into perspective first. And the work that went in to try to get that organised was actually terrific, given the difficulties faced in terms of no power, communication of minimal, if any, nature. But you're asking about particularly the community like Tuross. I believe that we do need to activate the local club in this case. There's a willingness, there's facilities there. I think it's all very well to talk about centralised evacuation centres, but I think in a shire like the Eurobodalla, with the spread that we have, it's essential that the smaller communities have something far more accessible and easier to reach. You can't turn around, as we saw, the difficulties that folk face, say being told to leave from Tuross to go into Moruya or from some of the outlying areas into the Narooma situation. I believe we can better use our local facilities, and we certainly need major evacuation facilities in our large centres, but I think we can do better with the existing infrastructure that is here and the willingness in particular that is here within the communities.
I'd just add that what we're also trying to do is get a emergency response centre, I think is what we're calling it. So that up to state-of-the-art centre, so that all of the emergency response people can be in the same room with the best communications and all that stuff, so that we can respond better, quicker, more efficiently. So that's actually something that we're trying to get built now.
Yeah, I would agree with Rob on that. Some of the facilities in the regions, especially spread as we are, they need to be upgraded. So things like clubs in small towns like this, in small areas, need to have solar panels, backup batteries, generators that are checked as well. And they have fridges and kitchens in those spaces to be able to look after people for longer terms. One thing we noticed after the bushfires was lack of storage and power out and comms down. So I think upgrading facilities in every little space, whether it's Badalla or Tuross, making sure there's a safe space for the community is key.
Yeah, well, I just convey the same thoughts as Matt. So I think we do have to get the community together, and that's another situation where the community will work with the council, and we can utilise our local clubs and stuff like that, and I think it's a good idea.
I think what exposed us in 1920 was a lack of knowledge, a lack of planning. Sorry, what is that? 2020. Sorry. Thank you, Tubby. We're all instantly aged. It really exposed it. So I knew as a longer term resident that for Moruya, the evacuation point was Gundary Oval. We've all since discovered, if you dig deep, that our disaster recovery plan was entirely inadequate, and it still is, you know. It hasn't been revised. We don't have a new one. If we had a new disaster hit us, we would all still be here wondering, where do I go? Where do I be safe? How do I hear what is going on? So I think the first step is to have a plan. So that's number one. It's not hard to do an adequate plan. The next step is let people know. It's communication. You know, at the height of the bushfires, Tuross is one road in, one road out. No one knew where to go. South Head was the same. Communities up and down were the same. I want to be safe, but I don't know where to go. The other problem, which really horrifies me, is the response to date to the Moruya situation, where we all headed in there because there was nowhere else to go. The only upgrades that have been made are some new toilet doors and some sockets to plug a generator in. That's the improvements that have been made. We need energy security, we need communication security, and most of all, people need knowledge as security so they can help themselves and help the others around them.
We are moving into a very different environment, and bushfires are just one of the many things that we need to be looking at. We may have floods, storms, a range of climate change-induced disasters. What we need to do is actually develop a comprehensive plan which accounts for all of those. Part of that is actually not responding after the disaster, but actually having disaster preparedness, having towns which are ready for disaster and know what they need to do. One of the things that we will be working towards in the community is building that community resilience, so that people, when they are faced with disaster, know what's available to them in their community, know where the cache of food is, know how to make a field kitchen, know how to kind of create latrines and cleansing places, know how to get water. One of the things that surprised me when I was talking to some people in Mogo was that water, it was drought, but there was water in the tanks, but they couldn't get to it. And that just got to me. Having a tap so you can actually get into the water supply, it is there. We need to actually make sure we have comms. One of the things that happened, I was actually on crutches after a knee replacement through the 2019-2020 files, and that was scary because in fact I was quite disabled and not too sure how things were going to work. And comms were out. We were sitting trying to work out what the hell was going on. The ABC was down and we were hearing hits of the 90s on Power FM. And that's just not good enough. We need to be kind of making sure that that's ready. So what we need to be doing is building up community resilience and then also having a disaster preparedness plan, not a disaster recovery plan.
Thanks, David. I was caring for people with disability during that time and it was just insanely frightening. They were so afraid. I have mobility issues. What if I need to move fast? I never want to live through that again. I never want them to live through that again. We've got a climate resilience plan in draft form at Council at the moment, and I really look forward to bringing that to fruition and building that resilience that we need, because this is about climate. A lot of us here were in the chamber when Councillor Pat McGinley brought the motion to Council in August 2019 to acknowledge the climate emergency and to put strategic plans in place around that. 7 councillors voted that down. And 4 months later, climate change arrived, it exploded on our doorsteps, and we ended up in a serious crisis. I just don't want to be there again. I'm sure there's going to be evacuation centres in the resilience plan, and I just want to let you know that I'm going to make sure that the people whose voices were not heard, the people who we forgot about, and the people with disability and anyone else that feels vulnerable at those times will be included in evacuation plans. We're not going to leave anyone behind.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Simon Cox has a question for the panel.
Hi everyone. This could be another question that could be answered with a show of hands as well. As regards the zombie development down at Kyla foreshore. An issue I'm very passionate about. A number of people in the room are passionate about as well. Currently the decision on material amendments to an old DA for the major housing development on the Kyla Lake foreshore is delegated to council staff. Some years ago, council had made a commitment to the community of Tuross Head to present the DA to council for determination. Will you support councillors taking back this delegation and making decisions on all major development applications to ensure community, cultural and environmental impacts are rigorously assessed before proceeding?
So, the question is, would you support that? Council laws making those decisions, and then I'll give you a chance to comment if any of you would like to. Okay, so what's the...
Can we see the hands on that, please?
Yeah,
Please?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, major developments.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry?
May I comment on...
Yeah, yes, certainly. So you, Rob wanted to comment? Gary first?
Thank you, Simon. Now that is a concern for the Tuross residents, the development up here on Kyla Lake. As you say, it's an old DA and it was approved in the days of old, and the conditions on it today would be different. If I were a councillor, I would want to see just what was approved and what sort of substantial commencement has gone on to keep that viable, to keep it alive. And what regular works have been done, again, to keep it alive. We're going back decades. If all of those things have been done properly, I'm afraid there's probably not much we can do other than appeal to the Land and Environment Court. Now, that will cost money, and if it's a loss of money for the community. So I totally agree with it. If it is proven to be correctly done, I would worry if we went to the Land Environment Court and lost a lot of money. That's the problem with that one right now, it's complex. But if I were a council, I'd want to see exactly what's happened and the proof to decide on that. Thank you.
Yeah, not a simple matter, as Gary has outlined, but having been chairman of the Planning and Development Committee for well over a decade, when that particular committee was in existence, I can tell you that sitting around with 9 unqualified people in terms of planning profession, you can sit there for a long time through a day and achieve very little. You need professional people to do the assessment. Now, in the case of Kyla, it hasn't been, the Kyla situation, it hasn't been determined. There are new requirements at state government level that need to be observed, and they need to be shepherded, obviously, by people that know professionally what they are doing. In terms of calling up major development before council, 3 councillors have the ability to do that any time. So that capacity is there. I would warn you significantly about a lot of uneducated or unprofessional people taking action in matters of development where they lack the professional ability to assess.
You haven't really got design.
There's a few things which I found interesting in that, but anyway. Okay. One of the things we will be doing if there's a Labor team with other councillors involved is we'll be proposing that we have a review of DAs which are more than 10 years old to make sure that they do actually meet our requirements now, not what happened 30 years ago like Tatiara Crescent, not what happened with other developments which we know are too long, have been there for too long and don't actually meet modern requirements. I agree, we need professionals to do that. We need professionals who can actually go through that and then do their job, which is to advise the councillors who represent the community so they can make a decision. I've worked as a relatively senior public servant in places and also worked in the council as a community services manager. I saw that as my job. My job was not to be the grand priest of community services who told the councillors what to do. My job was to make sure the councillors were given the information they needed to do their job, which was to represent the community and make decisions on behalf of the community. We need to be doing the same thing with developments. We've seen what happens when the councillors are locked out of that. Valley, Dalmini, the Kyla Lake foreshore. We can't let that go on. We will be proposing to other councillors that we do a thorough review of delegations to make sure the councillors once again have the job which they're meant to have, which is to represent you, the community. And so, yes, we will certainly support a review of delegations, and what we will also importantly support with DAs is that if they are more than 10 years old, they will be reviewed properly and looked at by the councillors.
So the main team, we have the same policy, is to review to review developments older than 10 years. We also have a policy to review delegations. If councillors can't understand the professional advice, then 2 things need to happen. We need to improve the quality of the councillors. We also need to improve the communication of the professionals. Because of one thing I know of my years on this planet is people will accept information, they will accept decisions if you are transparent in the process, if you bring them along with you, they are informed, they may not be happy, but if people understand the logical steps and you have covered all bases and made a hard decision, they're more likely to accept it.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to put a question which is not mine but comes from a Tuross resident who couldn't be here this evening. Eurobodalla is poorly served with public transport options. For example, there is only the school bus service from Tuross Head to Maria, no community bus services. What commitment would you make to improving public transport for the community? We'd like to deal with that.
Thanks, and a great question. It's a shame your questioner couldn't be here tonight. So, you know, public transport's always going to be an issue in the regions, or at least it always has been. But we're about to undergo a transport revolution in this country when we electrify everything. I think that's going to provide a really good opportunity for communities like Tuross to adopt electric buses, smaller vehicles that run on sunshine, and also escape the stranglehold of whatever the hell it is that means that school buses can't take fee-paying passengers on their runs. All of the issues that get in the way of people actually getting on a bus to get from Tuross into town, whether it be Narooma, Bodalla, Maria. So we don't have all the answers, but we are in the midst of some serious change around transport, and I think that this is going to be an exciting time for communities like Tuross when we explore what that might mean for them.
One of the issues with, I agree, there's a revolution coming and it's not going to be stopped, and it's going to involve electric vehicles of all kinds. And we need to, once again, as we were saying earlier, we need to be on the front foot. We need to be sitting there not saying, oh, well, it's going to come. What we should be doing as a council is how are we going to make that revolution come, and how are we going to make it work for us as a community. So it's important for us to start being involved in that planning now. That includes, you know, important things like kind of making sure that cars can be properly charged. One of the other issues that you need to be looking at with transport is part of the problem with transport is if you have long transport links, so that people can't have to travel from Narooma to Maria to Bateman's Bay. We need to be kind of looking at how we can actually perhaps make some of those trips not necessary. How do we actually do town planning in the smaller villages so that people don't have to travel as much as we need to now, and they can actually travel using bicycles, using electric vehicles. So we need to be starting to think about that. So we actually have to look at each town and each village. How can we actually make them so they're more transport friendly? How can we actually make them work so they work within themselves? And if we can start to do that, we can get in the front foot with this revolution, make sure it's going to work for us as a community, and then as part of that revolution, make sure we start to look at how we can actually make our local villages a place where you don't have to go all the time to Maria or to Bateman's Bay or to Narooma. And that also includes, in some ways, kind of the health stuff, actually making it so that primary health isn't something which you have to travel for.
Thank you. Anyone else for comment?
So, as you well know, Tuross may as well be an island for people who can't drive, and it's crippling. There's a lot of people who live here who can't drive, don't have the means to drive, which strikes to the heart of livability. And our communities need to be livable, not just accessible, but livable. And the problem is when you make suggestions about improving transport, it comes back to budgetary. We can't afford it, it's not in the budget. The buses funded by the state government to run the school runs don't have enough money, which is why part of our policy platform is to look at council's budgets, build budgets up from zero, and within that we look at serving the community, because that's what council is for, to serve us. And if Tuross needs more services, we need to have a look about how we can afford to make Tuross livable.
Having run Teen Safe for 20 years, I found a huge gap in this area in public transport. And to sum it up, public transport here is crap. The only decent service we've got is the school bus service, which is heavily subsidised. It's a licence to print money. Some years ago, I wrote to a local MP, from Teen Safe point of view, saying that we need a bus service in this shire, particularly in school holidays, because we've got a whole lot of youth out of school, can't drive, and they want to get around, and they can't, unless mum and dad drive them, and that just doesn't happen sometimes. My suggestion to the MP was, because these school buses are heavily subsidised, why not, when their contract is due, put in that contract, hey, in school holidays, you've got to drive this bus around, call it a $3 bus. And in this shire, at Maria, Batemans Bay and Narooma, we've got millions of dollars worth of school buses sitting in sheds, unused. I find it a shocking waste of infrastructure. Nowhere in the world will that happen, while in those school holidays, our kids can't get around. Now, my proposal was the bus companies share it. They do like a figure of 8. Maria, down the coast, back on the highway to Narooma. Same here, Maria, Batemans Bay, on the coast, back on the highway. Figure of 8, $3 bus, run at all school holidays. That's about 11 weeks of the year, and we don't do it. Council's not doing it, and if I were on council, I'd be pushing this to some sort of government subsidy and ensuring that contracts, lucrative as they are for school buses, include some system where they provide bus service through the holidays. That would include a night, so people go out for a drink and get a bus back. We're a holiday area, we're an area where people live. Why can't we do that simple thing instead of buses locked up mad?
I think again it comes down to communication, and if in services at council, if the community wants it, then we're there to make sure that the community gets what they deserve. And if the Tuross community, just like any other community in these regional spaces, is lacking services, it's all about the community contacting us and the councillors fighting for that. As the others have said, I think there will be some autonomous and electric powered buses coming to this region, but that's way down the track. I don't think it's, unfortunately, as soon as we'd all like. But until then, it's how can we serve the Tuross community and the Badalla community and all the other small regional towns all up and down this shire. And I think the most promising thing to me is that there's a brand new, fresh set of faces coming onto council. And I think no matter what, no matter who gets in, we're going to see a lot of change.
We do have I believe, a very good community transport division on council, but if you are talking about private bus services, clearly we need to find some more money from the state. More than happy to have those discussions with local members and that sort of thing, so it's a discussion we can have and work forward, yeah.
Thanks. Now, we will have time for some questions from the floor. I'm going to put another one that's come in while people think about, because we've got a half an hour, so it's a great opportunity. We've managed to get through a lot, and if you have got a question, hopefully we'll get to it. In a presentation to council some time ago, Betty Urubadella made a presentation which put to the incoming council, the new council, the suggestion that there be an external local government consultant answering to council appointed to review council's strategic environment and its operational practices. Now that's a complex question, I know, and I don't expect people to give comprehensive answers to this, but to give you an example of the sort of thing we were looking at, one of the things that we would expect a consultant to do would be to look at applying a consistent definition for using commercial in confidence and legal privilege protocols with a view to maximising community access to information. That's come up to us many times that people feel that there is a veil of secrecy over council operations. Would any of you like to comment on that? But first, the idea of actually having an external review, and in particular the issue of secrecy.
We are supporting an external review of these services. We're also looking at making sure that on the panel of legal practitioners that the council has, that there is at least one person whose speciality is freedom of information, so they can actually give good advice about freedom of information. The other thing that we will be looking at too is actually having the principle of legal advice to the council being not one of convenience, but one of being the model litigant. So in fact, our job is to make sure that we are doing abiding by the law as it should be, rather than as it might benefit the council. That's especially important with freedom of information. Commercial in confidence, the same thing. We do want to have a review of the way that that the council uses such things as commercial in confidence to keep information away from the community. We will be expecting to see that review, but if it's an external one, we're more than happy, and we're hoping that the important thing is that we do get a review and we do actually look at how we can make sure the commercial in confidence is used rarely rather than commonly.
Anyone else like to comment on this?
Yeah, well, I really think that the new incoming council sitting here in front of us all now, we should make the decision. We all want to get an open council. We all want to live stream the meetings. We know what we want, so why do we want another consultant? We should just make the decision and open the council up. Surely it's not that hard.
Right reply?
Sure.
The reason we need sometimes to get good advice is because, as Rob actually said at one point, is that, no, I don't know everything. And when I don't know everything, what I do is I find people who know something about the concern I have, and I ask them to give me advice. And so an external consultant does that. I don't see that every time anything happens I need to have a consultant, but in certain things which are specialised, like the law, I do need to have someone who knows the law backwards. I don't know the law backwards. And that's the reason why I'd be asking for external consultant for this type of thing, because it is specialised, it is well beyond my knowledge base, and I would expect that person to make my knowledge base large enough so I can make an informed decision.
No public company, no incorporated company is permitted to operate without an external audit.
Exactly.
That is for a very good reason.
Yeah.
That is why you need a mechanism for an external body to look over our council. Because if we have the wrong executive staff, if we have the wrong general manager, if we have the wrong group of councillors, if we get caucuses formed, we have no hope. There is no way around it. We need a backstop.
I think many of us might consider that you can get a consultant to say what you want to say. Thank you. 10 points. I think if we get a consultant, we want to know what the conditions are and sort of outcome. We don't want someone being hired by someone else with conditions. In other words, if it's the right consultant, being honest, yes. But if it's some wishy-washy consultant paid to do a job, well, that happens and that's a problem. Not an easy one.
Well, we'll be calling for an external audit as well, and I think that's again something that's with the incoming new faces, you'll see the light being shined in places that it hasn't been before.
We have external auditors. That's just part of what we do, and we're overlooked by the Office of Local Government, which these processes are already happening.
You also have a reviewer for conduct.
I don't have any problem with discussing a review of this nature with the incoming council and coming to a considered decision.
Thank you.
Thanks. So there's clearly a mandate, I'd say. If my esteemed chair sitters are going to be on council, but how about the community audits the council? I think we need to put it out to the community that we all seem to have issues with transparency and accountability. So come to the table, tell us what you expect, what will it look like? How will we know that we're hitting the metrics that the community expects from us around transparency and accountability? Of course, consult the experts, of course. But let's commit to being open, transparent and accountable and asking the community what they think that's going to look like.
Way to go, Alison. Way to go.
Thank you. Okay, so here's your chance. If anyone has a question.
Thanks, Ben.
Can I remind you to look after your minutes?
I always do. Council allocates funds, our funds and grants to playgrounds and bicycle tracks, and most of us support adequate facilities for kids and active people. We have a wonderful sea here, a wonderful lake, estuaries, but council has historically not allocated a cent to marine infrastructure, boat ramps, fishing platforms, etc. So my question is to you, will you allocate equivalent funds to water-based facilities as council does to land-based recreational? It's a simple question, yes or no, but I'm sure people would like to know more about that. Thank you. Was I good?
There's a lot of different responsibilities that council take on, and there's a very detailed budgeting and planning process that takes place, particularly in the first year of a council. I wouldn't commit to an untold or
equivalent,
unplanned. No, I wouldn't commit to that because there's a range of planned activities already regarding upgrades and maintenance. In terms of water-based activity, I'd certainly promote and support additional action in terms of the planning and also the return of a greater proportion of what we spend in fishing and marine licences, etc., coming back, which are paid into the state side of things. So, yes, I think we all would certainly support greater concentration of funding and planning for marine infrastructure of the type you're referring to, but to blankly or blindly say, I'll commit the same amount that we're already spending for those other facilities, I wouldn't do that without a planning exercise.
So, Councillor Anthony Main has been an advocate for this for his 5 years on council. He's fought for boat ramps and fishing facilities. I also make the remark back to what I said before, we review all budgets, so that's how we look at that. As somebody who is a boater and a fisher and a water user, I'm embarrassed to bring my family and friends down here. The tables to clean fish, the water facilities, the ramps, the lack of care and maintenance of the grass, there's no benches, there's no shade. The oldest toilets are usually near where people fish and have their boats. It is a disgrace. I don't understand why it got to that point, and most definitely on the priority list.
I also would agree that we need to be, one of our first jobs is to actually review the budgets to make sure that they meet the priorities of the new council. I think we also need to be looking at that the council isn't the only repository of funds for these types of things. As we've all talked about before, our job as councillors and as the mayor is to act as an effective advocate for getting funding for adequate marine and maritime resources and facilities. I share your view. For a coastal council, which has tourism as one of its main industries, and to look at the state of our jetties, our wharves, our other maritime structures, I can't quite believe what I'm seeing. So we do need to kind of re-look at that and make sure that this actually looks like 2020, not 1920. And we need to start doing that now. And I would hope that that would be an important part of the review structure that new council brings in.
Questions? No.
Hooray, I get to take a mask off. Tonight we've talked about openness and transparency. Let's go back to 2016, right here in this hall. Everyone voted. And there you are on the mayoral tickets. And we're all going to vote number 1, number 2 in descending order, based on what we hear tonight. One of the interesting things that happened in the 2016 election that you might all recall is that Councillor Jack Tate received 14 votes and Councillor Maureen Nathan only received 4 votes, yet they both became councillors because of preferences. My question to you is, while I'm looking here and I'm determining whether to vote for you individually, exactly who am I voting for in your preferences? That's really quite critical, because we need to know, if we don't get you, who do we get?
Yeah, our team, Advanced Riverdale, we wanted to keep it very clear. We wanted to support new faces at council, and we want to steer clear of any political parties joining onto council as well, because we just believe that nothing against David, obviously, we think David's a great candidate, but once we get political parties in, we'll have the others joining as well. And we see what that looks like on the state and both federal level. So my number 2 on the mayoral ticket is Tubby Harrison, and my number 3 is Karen Steimer. And then on my council ticket, it's the same. It flows right down the list of my candidates or across to Tubby's team, A Better Council, and then into Karen Steimer's main team. So that would go to Anthony Main's team.
Greens are a party. Sorry. The Greens are a party.
Yeah.
I've spoken about that before. Yes, I know, but the Greens tend to, play this.
Yeah. Our preference file will go number 2 to Matt and number 3 to Karen, and then in the council it's the same way, number 2 to Matt and number 3 to the main team. And we are the same thing. We don't need big political parties in local government. We need a change from the people that we've got in there at the moment. We need to get some good people in there, and we just don't need to have the arguments that come from state and federal.
So we have not finalised our preferences. It's a big decision. I can tell you that we have been in discussion with Labor. I've been in discussion with Tubby. I've had conversations with Matt, and we've contacted James Thompson. We will release those during this week. But like Matthew and Tubby have said, the new council we want is changed faces and a new future for us, a better future. So we'll release those this week.
Thanks. You've also been in conversation with the Greens. Yeah. Our mayoral preferences run that we go number 2 to David Grace and number 3 to the main team, Cara. And on our council ballot, vice versa. Number 2 to the main team, 3 to the Labor ticket. And if you're in this room, I think you might just be a little bit more engaged in the voting process than to just follow our how to vote instructions. And if you're in this room, then I think you probably have the capacity to use all of your numbers so that it's your preferences that play a much larger role than any of the ones that we might dictate or arrange in our conversations. I also want to take the opportunity to talk about political parties in local government, the big scary monster. I think it's unfair to assume that you can't hold membership to a political party and represent your community at the same time. I can. I'm sure David and his team can too. The two are not mutually exclusive positions. And if you want to disqualify people from being councillors because of political party membership, when they might actually be the best person in the room, and the people who are actually here putting their hand up saying, I want to serve the community. We've heard some great initiatives from people here tonight, and I think it's a conversation we need to have. The fact that you're a member of a political party does not mean that you're bringing the argy-bargy of federal and state government into local council. This is the level of government closest to the community, and we are most accountable to our community. We live amongst you. I feel like being part of the Greens, as I said earlier, is just a shortcut for you to know who I am and what I stand for. And I'll just remind everyone here that we're all beholden to the Local Government Act. We must act in the interests of our community first. Community first, not the leaders of the party or the members of the party in Sydney or Canberra. Community first. And that's why we're here.
Thanks, Alison.
And I just want to apologise to Alison, that was a mistake of mine, not an oversight. But I just wanted to say something to Lay's point about preferences. More people are voting pre-poll. COVID regulations this year mean that how to vote cards are not going to play such a big part, as we have to be 100 metres away from all polling place. So the how to vote is going to be diminished this year. So your opinion and your choices, don't waste them. Use as many votes as you can to get the council you want.
Okay. Our preferences will go in the mayoral one. Will go to Cohen Starmer, the main team, and then to the Greens. In the councillor one, it'll go to the Greens 2, and then to Cohen Starmer 3. We have also on the mayoral one, we've put Matt Hatcher number 4 and Gary Smith number 5. I also want to talk about this boogeyman that always comes up, about how somehow or other, if we get kind of political parties into the council, that somehow or other it's going to be turned into something which doesn't represent the people. We do not get any direction, in fact we don't get many funds either, from the state or federal Labor Party. Our policies have been built by local people who are committed to this community and are prepared to spend substantial amounts of time working with the council team to make sure that we get the best possible deal and we get the best possible policies for this area. These are local people. These are people who have been passionate about their community for years. They are not apparatchiks. They are not kind of faceless men. They are not. They are ordinary people in this community who want to get the best for this community. That's why I joined the Labor team. The other thing about Labor and joining a team and a party is that I can get advice and support which I cannot get as an independent. I can actually talk to other Labor mayors. I can talk with reasonable ease to Labor members of Parliament, both state and federal, which I cannot do as an independent. Just my last point point about this is be very careful of independents. Read very carefully where their political affiliations lie. There are independents in this room whose affiliations are very different to what you would expect them to be.
There's one here. Yes.
Sorry, not everyone gets provided that.
Oh, sorry.
But can I just...
Sorry.
I don't think Rob has yet.
You can choose not to.
I want to clarify. You choose not to.
Clarify what I said about political parties. It's not necessarily my concern that David doesn't have the interest of the public or the community in mind at all. It's more about that communication to the next levels of government. My biggest concern is that if we have a Labor mayor, for instance, they may not have such a direct line to a Liberal federal or state member. And that's my biggest concern, that our community could miss out because of those fighting in politics that we have. As a complete independent who's voted every which direction, including Green, in my life, I can say I have a very good relationship with both Fiona Phillips and Andrew Constance and Christine Bain, every federal and state member in this area, and that's something that we have to have at all times. No matter who's in power above, we need to have very good communication and very good relationship with those people.
Well, I'm sorry, we really need to go to some other questions if there are other questions here, David. Did either of you who haven't responded want to respond to that, to the preferences? Okay. There's another question waiting, sorry.
Hello, just a quick one. Regarding tourism and Narooma, I find it quite crazy that the Narooma Visitors Centre was closed. It's a tourism town. Bateman's Bay Visitor Centre is still functioning.
No, closed.
No, it's closed too.
Closed.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay. I saw something saying, anyway, never mind. But why? When we are primarily a tourism area, why are these services closed? When I go on holidays, I go to the visitor centre. They know what is going on at the grassroots. They, especially if they are paid people funded by council who have been trained, they know how to deal with the public and they have the information that you need. Can I ask each of the councillors to show by hand whether they would support the reintroduction of the visitor centres?
We'll just get a show of hands and then get you to comment. Okay, so there's a couple of hands up. Okay.
I think the Bateman's Bay was going to be reimagined as a new pub, so there would be something.
Okay, sorry. Okay, you can't hear. Okay, so it's a little bit more complex because the PAB is going to have a facility, but it is an information centre as it currently stands. It's a question, it goes to a number of things because it's budgetary implications and the like, but I guess it's an in principle, do you support an in principle there being information centres? Is that sufficient to your question? Support in principle there being information centres available to the public in our tourist towns?
We rely on tourism for our
Okay.
What we've moved to is terrible.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Rob, you wanted to comment?
It's very much, it was a very considered decision, and it wasn't an easy decision, but I can assure you that the cost of maintaining physical tourist information centres as against where the majority of tourism demand is coming from, which is moving to an online situation, both in terms of accommodation and booking tours and all the rest of it. The money needs to be allocated where it's going to deliver the best and greatest result for the community. I absolutely accept your observation that it's lovely to have somewhere to call in and get that reassurance and get that direction, but I can tell you the dollar value is not there for the overall tourism industry.
2 points, I'll be quick. Number one, the Narooma Visitor Centre was not just a source of tourist information, it's a community centre. And it flows with what we're seeing is we're losing our community centres. So I support having a community centre that also serves as a visitor information centre reopened. We're not all online. I am, but not everyone is. Until we transition to a time in the future where our online services are available for all, really budgetary.
It's not about money. This is a tourist centre. We need people who can actually come here and get advice. I was talking to some people who were tourists about this. They were online, they know about how to use a computer, but they don't use it to get visitor advice. They were absolutely astounded that in fact there wasn't a visitor centre either in Batemans Bay or Narooma. They wanted somewhere where they could go and talk to someone about accommodation advice, about what types of things might be interesting to them and to their children, and they couldn't find it. The visitor centres also act as community hubs, as you've just said, Karen, and we need to kind of maintain that. Once again, what's happened is the council hasn't looked at what its job is to do, is to serve the community. It's been looking at money, and we need to be kind of, money's important, but the real balance should be this community.
Any other questions? One there? Yep.
I've been teaching in this area for a long time, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are about keeping young people in this area. I know they've got to go away. That's part of the deal, and stretch their wings. But I think this place can be a learning centre as well as a pristine environmental area. The nature coast could also be a learning town. So what are your thoughts about upgrading TAFE even more, or lobbying for that, and the university campus at Batemans Bay?
My three children grew up here and love it, and my youngest daughter is still a resident here, and with her husband has a very substantial business. She's also a TAFE teacher in her chosen field, which is horticulture. We need the TAFEs. We need to kind of make it so that it is an attractive place for young people to stay, because if we don't do that, we get a community which becomes isn't vibrant. We need to support the TAFEs in a number of ways. As a mayor and as councillors, we need to be starting to think about things like apprenticeships, making sure that the council does its job in terms of being an apprentice factory in a sense, kind of producing opportunities for young people to learn trades. That's one of the things that used to be at the council. You used to go to the council to get a trade, and it was a really good place to do that. We need to make sure that keeps happening.
Absolutely back what David's just said about TAFE, and we are, again, living in fear that they're about to snatch it away from us. TAFE is constantly under threat, and I think that council does already have good partnerships with TAFE, and we must ensure we continue those partnerships and absolutely lobby to keep TAFE here in the Shire. Likewise for the Bay University campus. The workforce is rapidly changing, and if we can't keep up, we will not have employment opportunities for our youth, and we won't keep them. So, yeah, absolutely, TAFE and university are the backbone of that, and we have to do everything we can, whatever council can in its capacity, to keep them here.
In total agreement with both David and Alison. I would just like to add that we are the only shire here that hasn't taken on an innovation hub. They were originally offered by University of Wollongong. Bega has embraced it, Shoalhaven has embraced it, and Bega has 4 exporting industries on small scale coming out a little bigger, and for some reason our council hasn't embraced that. It came with funding. It was like a free thing. And not all young people have the aptitude to study. The innovation hubs are there to take an idea, and they get their full resources, they're handheld to develop their idea into an industry, into a job, whether it's micro or macro, and that's the sort of thing that is going to excite our young people, train them and have them stand on their own feet and build clever industry. We can be a clever place.
I have four kids, all grown up. They've had to leave, go to Sydney for jobs. They'd love to be here. They love this area. Ain't going to happen until things get better here. Definitely TAFE. We've got to have the TAFE system up and running, much better than it is. The new hospital, new bridge of the Bay, new bypass and bridge of Maria, all on the way. This area is on the cusp of a lot of changes, particularly with the COVID, of course. As you know, everything's, the land is scarce, people are moving here. We've got to be smart. This new council, we're on the edge of a huge change. If this new council isn't on top of things, we could lose what we've got. Very important that we're in tune with what's happening. And as I said before, my philosophy is ESC, is economy, sustainability, and community, the most important one. We've got to keep those three together and make this area, we can't overdo it, we can't overdevelop it, we can't underdevelop it. It's so important to keep those three key things together, and this new council has got to be smart enough to do that.
Yeah, youth retainment's a key to advance your redundancy policy. Just a bit of background, my wife's a teacher as well, as with my mother-in-law locally in a primary school. I have two young kids, and the biggest thing I want for them is their ability to have the option to stay or go. I was lucky enough to leave where I was born and come here and find this beautiful place, but you know, there's not many job options about. One thing we've done in Bateman's Bay, I helped start the first co-working space, which was tech-based. I also helped start the first, what was called Cultivate Space, and it was an art space. Free to artists in the area to come in and do artists in residence, and it was all about mentorship as well to the local youth. There's a lack of mentors I find in this space, and one thing I've done is I've just recently taken on 3 different small businesses to help mentor them and get them started. And I think there's enough brain power in this community and in this shire that if we all banded together and we really started pushing and supporting the youth as they come up, that we'll keep a lot more around. The future is very, very bright for this shire in the next 5 to 10 years, and I think the next council is going to be pivotal in making sure that it goes in the right direction.
Thanks. And Rob is
Like the key to keeping young people here is 2 things. It's good jobs, not just jobs, but good jobs, and affordable housing. Those are 2 things that I've certainly been working on for the last 5 years, and will be if we're elected. So you need to get those 2 things going. Education is important, of course. You know, obviously we back TAFE, we back uni. You know, improvements need to be made, but jobs and housing, I think, are the pivotal points.
This will be the last one, and then we've got the wrap of the most important business of the night, so, hold on.
Absolutely agree as to the importance of TAFE, and if you have a look, you'll see that council have worked with TAFE, and there is a significant addition to the TAFE in the university and library situation at Bateman's Bay. The construction started in the middle of this year and is scheduled to be finished by around Christmas time. I introduced the apprentice and traineeships in council in the early 90s when there was an economic downturn, and I was involved for 20 years as a director with Certec, which was a training and enterprise centre. Was centred in Bega, but obviously had offices in Bateman's Bay and beyond. It was a big organisation at that time. We now, in council, consistently take in every year new apprentices and new trainees, and the numbers vary between 15 and 30 depending on. So don't for a minute think that council is not fulfilling its responsibilities and taking the opportunities, because those people that we take on as trainees and apprentices, by and large, end up our permanent employees or go to other divisions of local government, other areas, as skilled and highly valued staff. So council is fulfilling its role in that area. It also cooperates with the universities around the place and the TAFE. I'm appalled at the way Maria TAFE has been run down over the years. The TAFE system needs to be bolstered. That's where the daily skills come. Not everybody is an intellectual, but by gee, we're running terribly short on skilled tradespeople in this country and in this area, and we need to maintain and improve those facilities for all of the people coming through, because we just are short of those things. So anything we can do to work in those areas is essential.
Thanks, Rob.
And thank you to the panel. It's been really, really interesting, I think, and all of you. I mean, it's been much more engaging than it might have been. I think you've been really great. You know.
Thank you.